You're a type 2 diabetic and you know that exercise in general is good for you, but are there certain ways of exercising that are superior to others? Is it a case of more is better, or is there a point of diminishing returns? All these questions and others will be answered in this video. But to really evaluate exercise and compare it to each other, we have to understand something called the FIT principle, F-I-T-T. That stands for frequency, intensity, time, and type. When it comes to cardio, frequency means how many days per week. Intensity means your pulse. Time is very simple, that's the duration, and the type, that's cardio, strength training, or stretching. When it comes to strength training, it's a little bit different. Frequency is still number of days per week, but intensity is either how many repetitions you did versus how many you could have done, or as a percentage of your one repetition maximum. Time does not apply to strength training, but rather it's more about a question of volume, how many sets and reps, and type is the same, cardio, strength training, or stretching. In one study, 62 diabetics were divided into two groups. Group number 1 did strength training, and group number 2 was the control group. They did not exercise. After 16 weeks of progressive strength training, group 1, which did strength training, lowered their A1C by about 1.1%, from 8.7% down to 7.6%. Quite impressive. Now, how does that compare to cardio? In another study, researchers found similar reductions in cardio as with strength training. They also reduced their A1C by about 1.1%, from 8.9 down to 7.8. So to answer the question of cardio versus strength training, the answer is yes. It's not one or the other, it's both. They're both equally effective at reducing A1C or blood sugar levels. Now, within cardio, we have to ask a sub-question. That is, should you do steady cardio or interval training? By steady cardio, I mean you keep the same speed for the entire duration of the workout. Intervals means that you're alternating periods of a high speed intensity effort with periods of low intensity or effort. And so are they equally effective, or is one of them superior to another? That's what this study wanted to find out. In this study, participants were divided into two groups. Group number 1 did steady state or continuous cardio. Group number 2 did interval training. In both cases, the calories burned were equal, so that group 2, that did do high intensity, they burned those calories in a shorter period of time. Despite the same frequency and caloric expenditure, group 2, the one that did interval training, had far greater reductions in their A1C compared to group number 1. Group number 1 reduced their A1C by only 0.3%. Group number 2, that did interval training, reduced their A1C by 0.9%. So for less time, they actually got triple the result, even when the caloric expenditure was the same. So here it's a very clear superiority for interval training. The next question we need to answer is frequency. How many days per week should interval training be performed? Most studies show reductions of about 1.1% when interval training is done 3 days per week. Twice per week is actually significantly less effective. It's only about 0.4%. When you go from twice per week to 3 times per week, reductions in blood sugar are quite significant. But there is not the same proportionate reduction when you go from 3 to 4, and almost no reduction when you go from 4 to 5. So there is a point of diminishing returns here. One study even tried to answer the dream question of how little work can I do, how little exercise can I do and still see improvements in my blood sugar levels. What they did is they had participants exercising for durations as low as 12 minutes and as high as 40 minutes per week, not per session, per week. And despite those little amounts of exercise, they still reduced their A1C by 0.9% over a 16-week period without any changes in anything else: nutrition, strength training, supplements, medications, etc. Why do they have such impressive improvements in such a short period of time of 12 to 40 minutes per week? Because of the intensity. The intensity of these people was extremely high. It was more than 90% of their maximal heart rate. In addition to that, their full program was this: over 90% of maximal heart rate, so that answers the intensity question. The intervals, they did between 8 and 14 intervals, and the duration of each interval lasted from 30 to 58 seconds. So if you're wondering, what exactly should I do? There is your answer. As for specific machines, equipment, forms of exercise, it's all the same. Whether you're swimming or running or cycling or rowing or on the elliptical, makes no difference. The only things that make a difference are the intensity, the duration, the frequency. So we know that with cardio, it is definitely a case of more is better. The higher the intensity, the greater the blood sugar reductions are. What about strength training? Is it an equal type of thing where more is better, or is there a certain intensity that's the sweet spot? Well, it appears that there is a sweet spot for strength training, and it's not a case of more is better. A very robust meta-analysis looked at different studies relative to each other that used different intensities from as little as 40% intensity, which is very lightweight, all the way up to maximal intensity. You find the heaviest weight you can lift for one and you do that. Which one has the better reductions in blood sugar levels? It appears that at intensities below 60% of your max, the blood sugar improvements are negligible, between 0 and 0.3%. However, though the studies that use 60 to 80% intensity actually show the greatest improvements in blood sugar levels. Why is that? Why is it not a case of more is better? Because unlike cardio, when you go maximal, you can only do one rep. One single rep might take you 3 to 6 seconds, then you have to rest for a long period of time. You just can't accomplish a lot of work when you're lifting maximal weights. But you can accomplish significant work when you're working at sub-maximal weights. And if you're wondering, how do I figure out the right number of reps? What is 60%? What is 80%? I'll give you a very simple way to figure it out. Aim for between 10 and 15 repetitions. That corresponds to about 60 to 80%. That's your rep range, 10 to 15. What that means is that every single exercise, every single set, you should aim for 15 repetitions. If you can do 15, raise the weight the next workout. If you can do between 10 and 14, keep the weight. If you can't even do 10, lower the weight. And that is how you know you're working at an appropriate level of exertion or intensity. The other element that we need to answer with strength training is how many sets and reps. I wish there was a study that directly compared different volumes, numbers of sets to each other. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist. So because it doesn't exist within one study, we have to look at multiple studies. So in terms of frequency, studies where people are exercising twice per week or less, they show reductions in A1C by between 0 to 0.4%. Not that impressive, but it jumps a lot when you go from 2 to 3 times per week. Now people reduce their A1C by about 1.0 to 1.2%. So for 50% increase in frequency, they get something like 200% increase in effectiveness on their A1C. Now it's not clear if going from 3 to 4 times per week is superior or 4 to 5, but we know that 3 times per week is kind of the sweet spot. Back to the question of what's the right number of sets. In studies that use 1 to 2 sets, they don't really show any improvements in blood sugar levels. Now yes, their strength improves, but their blood sugar doesn't. However, studies using 3 or more sets showed much more robust reductions in A1C of between 1.1 and 1.3%. So again, there's our sweet spot, 3 to maybe 4 sets. 2 is good for strength improvements, but not necessarily blood sugar improvements. The last question that we want to answer is, with strength training, should we do full body workouts or body part splits? Body part splits are when you select 1 or 2 muscle groups and you do them on one day. For example, day 1 might be a chest and back day. Day 2 might be arms and shoulders. Day 3 might be legs and abs, etc. Is it better to do full body or body part splits? The research is actually pretty clear on this. Full body workouts are superior to body part splits when it comes to diabetes reversal. Now, if all of this is too complicated for you, or you're afraid of doing the wrong exercise and getting hurt, that's completely understandable. That's why we have a special service helping type 2 diabetics reverse their type 2 diabetes using exercise and nutrition. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to our homepage where you can schedule a 10 to 15 minute Zoom chat, which is no pressure, no sales pitch, no obligation, just to see whether or not our services are for you and to understand your situation better. Now, for some people, what I've already covered in this video is good enough. They're ready to go out there and exercise. Other people want to understand why. By what mechanisms do both cardio and strength training improve blood sugar levels? There are 2 major mechanisms. Cardio and strength training both use a mechanism called glucose disposal. Glucose is another word for sugar. When muscles work, the primary fuel source for working muscles is sugar or glucose. So it gets out of the blood, inside the muscles or the heart, to be burned off, to be used for energy. Both cardio and strength training accomplish that. There is also one mechanism that only strength training accomplishes that cardio doesn't, and that's called glycogen storage. What is glycogen? Glycogen is the plural word for glucose. So many glucose molecules together are called glycogen. You can store about 5 grams of sugar in your blood. You can store about 90 grams of sugar in your liver, and you can store about 350 in your muscles, if your muscles are of adequate size. Now, if your muscles have atrophied due to disuse or not strength training in years or decades, then they can't store 350 grams, they can store less. Where does the extra blood sugar go if it doesn't go in the muscles? It stays in the blood. And so by increasing muscle size, you increase the reservoir, the storage space for sugar, and that's how it allows the sugar to get out of the blood and inside the muscles. If you like what you learned about in this video, I have a special newsletter. It's free for diabetics, especially if they're over 50. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll give you a chance to subscribe to that newsletter. Again, it's complimentary, no pressure, and you can always unsubscribe. Thank you and goodbye.